There it is. We are live. It is Stick to Hockey Live, episode number 69, and we are going to the goalie guru. It's Jason Myrtetus. It is the one and only from InGoal magazine, at Kevin is InGoal on Twitter. Got to go to his website as well, ingoalmag.com. It is Kevin Woodley. Woody, how are you?
Hashtag nice on the episode number, right? I played beer league last night, and there was a guy on the other team that was wearing that jersey number, and sure enough, he was the guy that was running around doing stupid stuff. It's so predictable.
You leave it to any donkey beer league team. There's always some juvenile clown that's got that jersey on.
100%. Like every time, as soon as you see that jersey, like it could be like old man hockey, and he'll be like the one guy who's underage out playing with the old men, but he's not actually good, but he's going a million miles an hour and trying to hit guys and slash guys. And every single time it's that jersey. Anyways, good to be on with you, buddy. I'm looking forward to catching up.
That guy's always got like a half visor on, looks kind of
tinted.
Yeah, the old Ovi tinted visor. That's great. I wanted to get you on, and I know I've gotten a lot of messages from Stick to Hockey listeners over the last couple of last period of time, couple months, to get Kevin on to talk about goaltending and talk about Carter Hart, talk about now Cal Peterson as well, who the Flyers acquired in that 3-team trade with Provorov and Columbus and the LA Kings, and also about the goalie market. And there's a lot of rumors about Carter possibly being traded. So we have a ton to get to. Well, let's start first and foremost, at this past season, because, Torts comes in and he certainly provides a little bit more structure, a lot more responsibility when it comes to shot blocking. And I thought Carter had the raw numbers aren't there. But if you watch the games, he was flat out dominant at points. He had stretches where he went 6-8 games with over a .950 save percentage at times. Had a rough spot in the season, but I thought he rebounded well and hung in there mentally this season. How would you kind of encapsulate the year for Carter Hart?
It's funny because I looked up his numbers right before they were coming to town, which was mid-February, right? And then basically the road trip started in Seattle before coming up to Vancouver, which was, that's the thing about the Kraken being here, sort of a new route. Everything used to run through Alberta into Vancouver. And now it's sort of sometimes those trips start in Seattle. So up until that point, I just went back and pulled them because I remember looking at those numbers and I'm like, he's coming into town. Like Jason, he was inside the top 10. He was tied for 9th in adjusted save percentage at that point in the year. There were 4 guys that I think all were like plus 1%. Alexander Georgiev, Tristan Jarry at the time, Logan Thompson, and Carter Hart. And to me, that's impressive, right? Like plus 1% on a team that. Yes, you're right. Improved structure. Expected save percentage was still 3 points below league average. So, the environment still, it's not like it was, we're not talking about the 95 Devils here. It got better, but still below league expected. And he was outperforming it by a significant margin. You talked about the start he got off to. I guess what I would say, and now those dropped off. By the end of the year, I think he finished at plus 0.4%, which is closer to 21st, 22nd in the league. So those last couple of months, actually, if I remember correctly, kind of started on that road trip. Things started to crater a little bit on that road trip, at least statistically. But hey, if I'm not mistaken, this season was the most games he's played, right, in the National Hockey League level. So there's an adjustment period, and the environment took a slight hit over those final, it got a little bit worse over those last 2 months as well. Like he finished with an expected of 887. Still outperformed it, like I said, to the tune of about 20th in the NHL, which isn't bad. But I think what you saw was longer stretches of better Carter, of the potential that, hey, I'm biased. I've always believed in the kid and believed in that potential as a goaltender. And so it was nice to see that for longer stretches. Like I said, the last 2 months of the season were a little tougher. I'm assuming that some of the moves around the team, some of the environment around the team, you hit a grind there when you're not in it. And you're playing teams that are, and it's really hard to sustain. But I think overall, this was a positive step for him this season. And, I'd like to think it bodes well for the future, especially like I said, that start that we saw from him combined with, like I said, through mid-February, that's a good 2/3 of the season. And he's performing at a top 10 level. You'll take that.
Yeah. And I always say that, a good team or a bad team will eventually grab the goaltender and kind of drag them to their level as well, because he had no run support. The team just struggled to score. And you mentioned how he got out of the gate. The first 8 games, 6-0-2 record. He had a 946. He's raw. 946 save percentage in those first 8 games. I mean, team wasn't scoring, but he was out there. And maybe that's kind of a window, Woody, into what he could be, not that dominant, but that on a consistently good team with an environment that is consistent in structure seasonally for him to be able to really put up one of those monster statistical seasons from the raw numbers and the advanced.
Yeah, when I look at their defensive profile, it's not bottom 3 in the league, and that's where I think you can really get dragged down. We saw that here in Vancouver. Like Vancouver went from a bottom 3rd team to a bottom 3 team under Boudreau for the first third of the season. And like, to me, that drop, as much as it's just 6 or 7 spots amongst teams in the NHL, it was almost exponential. Like, just no predictability at all in front of them. The Philly was sort of 23rd in 5-on-5 high danger chances against, which, again, that's bottom 3rd, in that 22-23 range. So certainly not a favorable defensive environment, but like you said, within that, you can have a little more predictability, a little more battle in front of your net, a little more sort of collapsing and some form of structure. So, I think it's hard to forecast exactly what it would be behind a quote unquote better defensive team. Like, I think you actually need to get more granular than that. Like, for example, like Carter's numbers, breakaways, he was slightly below expected. Every other number is either even or better than expected last season, except for slot area. Slot area, which, encompasses a couple different types of chances, just clear slide in the slot. So clean looks in the slot, and odd man rushes, clear sighted, where you got to look at it. The guy shoots, but he's in the slot area. Those are the only 2 areas. At the end of the season, he's about 5 or 6 goals below expected. That's the only number. And so when I look at that, like, I think, wow, like, we're watching 2 teams in the Cup final right now that, guess what they've done to get to the Cup final? They don't give up those types of chances, right? Like, Sergei Bobrovsky, like, everybody talks about what's happened this year. Well, I can tell you what's happened. You look at his numbers over the last couple of years, everything is sort of between the face-off dots is where he's gotten absolutely chewed up since going to Florida. A lot of low shots over the pads, pop passes into that middle ice. And that's where he's been at times exposed, particularly on the glove side, not shooting from the glove side, but plays to or from that side of the ice. When was the last time you saw them give up those, right? Like, they just haven't through a long portion of this playoff run. And screens as well, like an area where statistically over the last couple of years he struggled. Like, and we're seeing it in the Cup final. Take away his eyes, you got a chance. Don't let him see it, and he's still Bob, right? Yeah. Like, even on laterals, he's still Bob. So that's where, good defensive team. Like, you can have a good defensive team, but they still give up chances that maybe don't fit your goaltender's strengths. I think anybody that takes away sort of that slot area with Carter, the one area where he's been exposed a little bit, you're going to have a good fit, especially sort of that high mid slot area.
Yeah. Let's just talk about environment real quick, because, I've gotten a lot of messages and tweets from people saying, well, the goalie's got to lead the way. They gave up the blah, blah, blah most goals in the league this year, and this guy's a better goalie than him because he had better numbers. And I remember a conversation I had, maybe it was even on InGoal, with Robin Lehner, when he said, when I was in the Islanders playing behind Barry Trotz's team, and he went to Chicago, and he said, I played so much better goaltending in Chicago than I did with the Islanders. And the numbers, you go, what, are you crazy? But playing behind a Barry Trotz team compared to that Chicago team, which gave up a ton off the rush, didn't protect the middle, slot line passes, the whole thing. But his game was, as the goalie feels it, was way better in Chicago, even though the raw results weren't. So talk about environment and explain it to people that environment doesn't just matter. It is of the utmost importance for a goaltender. Okay,
so the Lehner conversation, I actually remember having this, and we did have something along those lines at InGoal. A lot of it was like comparing New York to Buffalo too. I can be on my game, playing really well. And in New York, I think he said we would get an odd man rush once every 2 games. But in Buffalo, he would get 3 or 4 odd man rushes a game. He's like, even if I'm playing good, really on top of my game and feeling it, odd man rushes are going to go in, like 2-on-1s, like those are the types of chances that end up in the net. So if I see 1 every 2 games versus say 3 a game, like even if 1 of those 3 goes in, I'm actually still feeling good and playing well, but obviously the numbers are going to be totally different. So that's like it might be an oversimplification. I mean, obviously I remember when he talked about New York, like it goes so much more, like the systems, the way goalies rely on systems and the predictability of their players executing the systems in front of them. The examples I used to like from Robin were like, it was screens. Like, what side of a screen should I be on? Well, if I take the short side, which is your typical goalie solution, because the path for the puck into the net is always shortest and quickest from the short side of the net. It's got to travel further distance to go to the middle, and there tends to be more bodies in the middle. So if I've got a screen in front of me and I got to pick a side as a goalie, I pick short side. And now the player that's either fronting that screen or going out to the shooter, he needs to be in the middle lane. Like my job is this, his job is that. Yep. And if that puck goes to the middle, hopefully I have sight on it because I picked the side and I can establish a sight line and I can shift over. But also his job is to block that. Yep. And so when those things are on the same page, and it's become increasingly hard because the offense has become so dynamic that, you know, everybody's scrambling around, so sticking within that. But when you're on the same page, your life as a goaltender is so much easier. You know, I talked about Carter's plus 0.4 save percentage, adjusted save percentage this year, and how that, you know, was as high as +1, top 10 in the NHL, and +4 by the end of the year grades out around the 20s. I don't even look at his raw numbers, so I'm sort of scrambling here to look up his numbers versus, say, Stuart Skinner, another guy he trains with him this summer. So it's a perfect sort of comparison. Young guy coming up. He's a little behind Carter in terms of experience. But like Stuart Skinner is a finalist for the Calder Trophy. I'm guessing his raw numbers are a lot better than Carter's. Again, I don't even look at those anymore.
Carter ended up with a 907.
And Skinner was around 915, 914, around there.
Yeah, I'm looking it up now. But you're right. And when people go, well, that's Edmonton. They can't defend. But in actuality, they defend on the regular season.
Defended at a top 5 level when it came to giving up the ones that matter the most as an analyst. And when I look at sort of some of the fancy stats on Clearside Analytics, so to speak, those high danger chances 5-on-5, Edmonton was a top 5 team. They were top 3 for a large chunk of the year. Stuart Skinner had one of the highest expected save percentages in the NHL. His adjusted numbers are actually slightly worse than Carter Hart's this season. Now, those numbers aren't perfect, but they give you a glimpse into what a goalie is facing.
914.
And trying to compare those two side by side just based on the raw save percentage, like it's not even apples to oranges. It's apples to dolphins. You know what I mean? Like I don't even know how you make, like it is so different, right? So that's why we have these numbers. That's why we look at environment. It matters. It's not just, and again, they're not perfect. Sergei Bobrovsky, to go back to the example, as good as he was in the second and third round, he was actually below expected against the Boston Bruins. But if he doesn't stop Brad Marchand on a breakaway, I think it's game 6 that they won in overtime in the dying seconds of the third period.
Beater, yeah. It's
over, right? Like they're not still playing. He doesn't have a chance to go on that run. So the numbers aren't perfect. There are still moments within those numbers where you can make, the quote unquote, the timely save exists, right? Like every save time. Yeah. So Aiden's actually been, believe it or not, heading into the Cup finals, Aiden's adjusted save percentage was actually better than Bob's. Now, Bob was dragged down by that Boston series, but again, they're not perfect, especially in small samples, but they give us context that is very important, at least some concept of relativity when we add that context that you just don't get in the raw numbers. Listen, like even the public analytics, and this isn't a criticism of the people behind it, they're freaking brilliant people, smarter than I will ever be, than I ever was. And the stuff they do with the data is remarkable, but the data is limited. And one of the key things they rely on is location. Well, I mean, you're a goalie, Jason, so you get this. But for anyone else, so the closer you are to the net, the more likely it is to go in, basically, is what most of the location data tells us. Now, if we have 10 shots and Team A has 10 shots from, say, just above the top of the crease on the left side of the net, and Team A, 9 of those 10, the puck was there and the goalie was already in position when that shot was taken. I'm stopping 9 of 10.
Yep.
Because if if that puck is that close to the net and I'm in position and dropping a butterfly, they're like I could take a camera behind the puck and point it at the net. You will not
Nothing there.
see. There is nothing. So that shot, if 9 of the 10 are the goalie's already setting in place by the time that shot is taken, like those are not high danger chances necessarily. If the other team
doesn't make it high danger, the situation and how
right.
it unfolds makes it high danger.
If I'm facing the other face-off circle and that puck is passed to that same spot on 9 out of 10, and that's obviously extreme, but even if it's 5 out of 10, now I have to gain rotation, completely turn my body 180 degrees on my skates, drop a leg, get a push. Good goalies are getting a leg there. Good goalies are, a guy like Bob is not only getting a leg there and a pad sealed along the ice, but also a glove above it. Like they're going to get there on most of them, but there's net. And sometimes if there's a screen or a fake or whatever, they don't even get there and it's a tap in. My point is, without the context of how many out of those shots from that location were a rebound sitting there with the goalie already in position or a straight line attack versus that lateral play or a puck off the right side that hit a leg and bounced to that spot before. Rebounds are one thing. At least as a goalie, I can feel a rebound. Broken plays, if it hits a leg in front, I don't even feel that. Sometimes I don't see it. It goes to that guy wide open. I have no chance or very little chance. And so the added context of those environmental sort of factors, I just think, evaluating goalies without them is, frankly, kind of useless. Like the raw numbers just don't have enough data in them to make comparisons from team to team. Hell, even within the same team, quite often we see based on different starts and who gets what and what opponent and back-to-backs, we can see wide variances in expected save percentage, even on the same team. My favorite example is Lundqvist and Shesterkin when Igor finally came up. And that was when Lundqvist was actually still playing really well. Now, when they limited his minutes, his play dropped off a little bit. But it was fascinating. It was fascinating to see the difference in their expected environment. And if you dug in and did a little bit of sort of the eye test part of it, you could actually see that Igor's ability to handle the puck contributed to it. Whereas Henrik, there weren't many weaknesses in Henrik Lundqvist's game. Hall of Famer, first ballot every time for me, like one of the all-time greats. But he didn't handle the puck. Like, not only did he not handle it well, he just didn't get out and handle it very often. And so it was easier for teams to generate sustained forechecks against the Rangers when he was in net. Igor went in, stopped the puck behind the net, quite often made a quick up or a quick pass. Like, it's not the home run passes, it's the quick transition plays that get you out of your own end that counts the most. And Igor made those really well. And so his environment, that season was significantly easier. And I don't think it was, the Rangers buckling down in front of the rookie. No. A large part of it was Igor's ability to transition the puck out of their own end. So again, even on the same team, we can see differences in defensive environment. So by God, different conference, different team, different personnel, different systems, you're going to see massive differences. And so looking at Carter's 907 and, for example, Stewart's, whatever we said, 915 and saying Stewart was better, like it's just not a fair assessment.
Yeah, it's the thing is too with a guy like Shesterkin. I remember the Flyers playing him and seeing how he handles the puck. It then changes how you have to attack the zone, where you dump the puck, your choice whether to dump a puck because he can start a breakout with on the backhand or the forehand with a quick 5 or 7 foot pass. You got to keep the puck away from him because they're just going the other way. It becomes a wasted rush opportunity, and then maybe you try and carry the puck into the zone with possession, and that gets turned over above the top of the circle, and now you have the stress coming the other way. So there's so many low to high plays. Like that's the goalie nightmare for me. I'm looking this way, and I don't know where player X is moving this way, and if he comes out and it's a one-time shot, I'm taking away the lower third, and he's got to elevate, but I'm at their mercy at that situation.
Interestingly enough, low-high plays are one of the few things that Igor struggled with this year. It was one of the big differences the game. Teams were able to attack him low-high, and it was one of the few areas where there was a consistent pattern there where teams were having success, at least until late in the season when he started to sort of find his legs. And, again, like when we talk about this stuff, the analytics can provide us clues as to where we see strengths and weaknesses. And then you go in and you match it to the eye test. You do the work. I click one button and I can see like the numbers on Carter's slot area, 108 chances, 14 goals, 5 below expected. I click the button, I can look at all 108 chances or 14 goals and see if I can identify trends. That's what goalie coaches do. Let's see, okay, here's something where we're getting burned on. Is this systems? Is this us? If we can't change the systems, do we need to change how we're playing it?
Yeah.
Or can we adjust a little bit of both to help each other out better? And there's always a give and take. Like, it's a constant yin yang. Like,
Evolving,
hey, if we take this away, we're going to give that up instead. Is our goalie better equipped to solve that than rather than us continuing to give this up, this or that, right? There's always that flow. There's give and take in every decision a goalie makes, every save execution decision, every depth decision. And so much of it, I guess, last point on environment, and I'm going to plug InGoalMag.com on this one. One of the things we do is something called Pro Reads, and it's where we sit and we watch video with the NHL goalies, and they break down why they chose this depth, why they chose this save selection, what type of movement patterns they have in terms of the way they're moving around their crease based on what's coming at them. Right-handed shot with a one-time option off the pass, or is the puck carrier on his strong side or his weak side? Like, where's my... So all those breakdowns, like the first time I did it, and I'm 20 years into this, was with Carey Price. And like literally mushroom clouds going off in my head because I thought I understood the amount of information that a goalie processes in real time. And Carey was picking out details that I never even thought to look for.
Yeah,
and that's
on the Commodore 64. He was on like the biggest computer in the world.
Yeah, my computer doesn't even plug in anymore.
Yeah.
So I was amazed. And I knew we had something like, hey, like this is great for kids to see. Those are the details you need to seek out in order to sort of, find this is how they read the game. These are the things you got to look for. And one of the biggest surprises wasn't just the amount of detail, but we've done close to 200 of these now. And by the way, they're all online at InGoalMag.com. Shameless plug. But the thing that really blew me away over the 2.5 years we've been doing this, or almost 3 years we've been doing this, is how often it wasn't just, or wasn't even mostly about what these attacking teams' tendencies were going to be, whether it was a pre-scout or seeing a guy for years, or again, what hand he was or where he was on the ice. It was about trusting what your defense was doing. Yeah. I've got this because my guy's got that, and I trust him to have that. So I can take a little more ice here because I know the back door is covered, is a simplistic example. And again, another example of why this structure and the defensive play matters. It's not just about what you give up. It's about, is it what the goalie expected you to give up? Vegas was really sort of a great example of this for me with Fleury, when they had Fleury and Lehner that year. And I think, so I can't remember, was that Pete DeBoer there? They would give up a lot of high danger. So the goalie numbers were really good, and they were full value for it. But what the goalies could trust is the high danger was going to come from certain situations and from certain spots on the ice, so they could isolate it. They didn't have to worry about the high danger, like, bam, I push out to this high danger chance in the middle of the slot, but that guy's got 3 options. They could just focus in on the one option.
Yeah.
And exactly. And trust that that's all they had to worry about. And by doing so, you're going to even against high danger chances, you're going to have more success because you're not having to worry about his high danger chances and the 2 other high danger chances behind you he might pass to. And so the more a goalie can trust in that execution of a system that fits their game, the better off they're going to be, which again, none of that shows up in the raw data.
And it's conversely too. It's if that structure is not there, you can't trust the back door. Now you start loading your left leg to lean, and that causes you problems as well.
As soon as you cheat in this league, you're dead. Like, I always used to use the example when back in the day when the Oilers were actually a bad defensive team, when they were chewing up and spitting out goaltenders who would then go elsewhere and have success. It's like the most simplest example I can give is like if a guy's coming down and he's got a backdoor pass option, but you're supposed to stay on the shooter because that you got somebody who's supposed to cover that back door.
Yeah, and take away the pass.
It gets through 9 straight times, and you're doing your job, but the puck's in the net 9 times. It's not your fault. You're going to start to cheat. And as soon as you cheat and lean to that backdoor chance at this level, if the guy with the puck has time and space, he's taking advantage and shooting short side on you. Like, it's simplistic. It's oversimplistic. It's the type of battle that goalies sort of face. And, when things really get bad is when the goalie can't trust the environment and the players no longer trust the goalie. Because now they're going out of what they're supposed to be doing to try and help the goalie. Like, their intentions are good. They start chasing plays and trying to do too much because they're trying to actually help their goaltender. And pretty soon, everybody is trying to do everybody else's job and nobody is doing their own. And there's been a lot of examples of this. And once that snowball gets going downhill and building and getting bigger and bigger, there's been a few cases, over the years where it's like, I've said, I don't know that this can be fixed with all the personnel in place, and usually the goalie's got to move. Actually, you guys had that in Philly with Steve Mason when he arrived there. That's what had happened. And Steve Mason took, like, Jeff Reese deserves a ton of credit for all the help he gave Steve Mason once he arrived there. I think he helped him solve a lot of things. But Mason had made strides in his game in Columbus, but it was never going to matter in Columbus because the team in front of him had lost that trust. And so anytime he was in net, everybody was out there trying to do everybody else's job and nobody was doing their own. Yeah, and that included Steve. Like, because the defensemen are out there trying to protect Steve by getting out of their lanes, and then he can't trust them to be where they are. Like, it's just, man, that snowball is really tough to stop.
Yeah, I always use the real world example, not this past season, the season before the Flyers played the Bruins, and Carter got beat 3 times in the game on the back door on his blocker side. The guy wasn't covered, 3 goals. It was actually the 5th goal of the game that he gave up, was high glove from Brad Marchand with a backdoor option. Why? Because he was leaning. And it just beat him, and it's because he lost the trust that coverage was there. I got this question that comes in from Tim Tobin on Twitter at Tobinator, good hockey guy. He said, I'd love to hear more on guys in the RVH and getting sniped high and why we're seeing more bank shot goals from the RVH position. Are they still considered bad goals? Seems like some are just saying it's more of a great shot over a bad goal. Now, RVH, obviously, the thing about RVH for me, Kev, is a lot of people go, wow, why is the goalie down there? Well, you don't question it when a ton of saves look routine because of the choice of save selection of an RVH. You do have those 1 out of 100 where they find the little window up there next to the head. A lot of times that's because the goalie's not properly rotated. The post play is not right. The execution of the RVH isn't there. But answer Tim's question.
Okay, so the bank shot one, actually, I need to see some examples, to be honest with you, because the whole point of an RVH is if you're properly sealed, you shouldn't be able to bank it off you. Where you see pucks, and I'm assuming when he says bank shot, he means banked off of the goaltender.
Yeah.
A properly executed reverse is the whole idea is here you're limiting that. It's when you get caught with a skate outside the post. Marc-Andre Fleury was the prime example of this. When he was in Pittsburgh and he would start to struggle, he would chase plays and get over aggressive, and he was constantly outside his post. And that's, I think it was an Islander series in particular, they might have banked like 2 or 3 off his ass because he was outside his post. He didn't have it sealed. Yeah, and when Mike Bales taught him reverse, a lot of that ended, right? Because it gave him an anchor, a point he could go back to where he had coverage short side. He could move in and out of it. He didn't feel immobile, which is what the old traditional VH used to do. Guys felt locked into it. You had coverage in the middle of the net as well as a seal on the post, and you weren't exposed to the bank shots. In terms of getting caught snipe short side high, like there's times when some of those shots, you can look at him and be like, okay, so how would you like him to play this? If he squares up in a butterfly and drops, because from that range, it's probably a blocking butterfly anyways. Yep. It's not a reaction zone. Yep. It's probably still going over his shoulder, right? Like, so there are times when it's like, there are times where you just have to tip your cap and say, yep, hey, that's a hell of a shot. But there are also times where I think I see the hashtag, I always say it's the hashtag, it's RVH fail. We see it on the internet every time one of those goals go in. And sometimes I think it's important to look at the execution and say, okay, was this an RVH fail or was this a hashtag failed RVH? Yeah. Timing, execution, properly executed, that inside leg should be into the ice at an angle that allows you to use it to push up that short side shoulder. So maybe you're not reacting with your hands, but you can still react by driving that shoulder up to the top of the net, using that inside anchor. A lot of guys, and it amazes me how many at the NHL level do this, they allow that inside leg, the one that's sort of along the goal line, to just sort of drift back into the net rather than keeping it up at like a 30-degree angle relative to the goal line. And as soon as and they disengage it. Well, that's your connection to the ice. That's your ability to drive up into the top of the net. That leg being anchored and solid. And so, again, to me, that's a failure of execution. Sometimes you're just in it at the wrong time or in it too often, and you give that guys the option and you can't react and push up. Again, to me, that's a failed execution. You're using it at a time when maybe it's not the right save selection. It was designed to be something from dead angles. Anytime you see it and the puck's up in the zone, sort of above the top of the circle or up to maybe the face-off thought. A lot of guys will sit in it too long when it's along the wall and they'll be exposed because it pucks at the hash mark. Well, that's not a dead angle anymore. And You're in a dead angle save execution.
Especially as you move to the middle a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. And so
Felix Sandstrom suffered from that. He would stay in it too long and get beat high glove because there was just no way he was going to be able to react to get his hands up. And the dead angle is basically from the far post across the low hash mark, but as soon as it starts to come up towards a little bit, the dead angle's over. You got to get out of it and you got to regain your edges.
Yeah, and some guys would say the dead angle is like from the post to the the bottom of the face-off circle. Like it's even more sort of
that's how the line comes across.
Sharp angle. Yeah. Yep. So the other part of this though is we're not like we've seen other techniques evolve situation specific. The toughest one is off the rush. Right? Like a guy comes down the wing with speed, he's outside the coverage, and he gets down into that dead angle area. Now, if you go into reverse and you don't have that ability to drive, actually two things. I'm going to rewind before we get to that situation. You don't have to execute a reverse with passive hands. And some guys just, they put that shoulder inside the post, and now that limits where their arm is because they've dropped it for the short side coverage. They've treated it like a pure block. Watch Bob. Keep that hand up. Like how many times have we've seen shooters in this series look for that, and throughout these playoffs, look for that shot because they see he's down in reverse, but he's got the glove up, and they just shoot it right into an active glove. Forward. Yeah. Now, if it gets into an area where he can't react from that glove is also difficult. If you've got it up high, you're taking away top corner, but that becomes a long move to transition it down to bottom. So, it's recognizing coverage. If he's got that glove up high, you want to shoot just sort of off his knee, off his hip, and try and expose the hole that he's created there. But you can, you can play at active hands. Guys have active. I watch Demko work it. He keeps that blocker active all the time. So then we get into the situation off the rush that I was just talking about. So if you reverse and you're inside your post and that guy's coming down with speed off the wing, gets to the bottom of the circle, you drop into reverse and you've given up short side high. I understand the criticism. But if you square up on him in a butterfly and he pump fakes you from there, now think about this. You are facing the boards. You have dropped into a butterfly facing the right boards, for example, and he's going to go with speed on a wrap, and the wraps always look terrible. But the amount of rotation, we talked about cross ice plays and slot line plays and how much you have to turn. Yeah. Like you literally have to get your whole body from facing the right boards back to the left post. That is a massive rotation for a goaltender. Yeah. And so we've seen new techniques develop. One's called the panda, where it's an overlap, but instead of squaring up to the shooter, you have enough coverage, you can actually flatten it out along the goal line. So you're still in a butterfly with the skate outside the post, what we call an overlap. But instead of facing the shooter as he comes down there, you've sort of cheated. You've hedged yourself into the middle so that if he does wrap, it's an easier push. You don't have the big rotation, and you trust your coverage that you're still able to react to anything short side high. Your risk there is you're outside your net, so you could get bank shot if you do it too often and it becomes targetable. That's why it's called the panda, because the idea is when you execute this, you want to have your ass up against that post to try and seal that and prevent that bank shot. And one of the goalie coaches, when he first saw them playing with it, was Dustin Wolf with Calgary Wranglers. Thomas Spear, who's now with the San Jose Sharks as their head goalie coach, was the guy in the AHL then. And the director of goaltending saw it, and they were trying to come up with a name for it. And rather than overlap, flat overlap, which actually another goalie coach had written about it in 2014 for InGoal, the same concept with that type of name, they called it the panda because it looked like a panda with its rubbing its butt against the bamboo. And yeah, so it caught on a little faster because it's marketing, right? It's all about marketing. Good name. But But again, just another example of there are a lot of different ways to do this. So each and every failure, sometimes it's the execution. I rarely think it's the actual position itself that failed. Like I wish I could find really quickly the In Clark quote about the reverse. Like the idea, the just stand up crowd. It's just, hey, listen, there are times you can be more patient and up on your feet. And there are certainly some guys that linger in it too much and they'd be better on their feet. But the idea that we would just solve it all by just standing up is so patently absurd. Yeah. And the way he put it is no position in the history of goaltending has allowed us to connect our posts in and out to our movements as dynamically as this, to have the short side seal. Because that's the other thing. The whole thing was designed to get the short side seal, but also put your body in the net. Because up till that point, you either butterflied or you did a traditional VH, which is the short side pad up against the post and the backside down along the ice.
How Michael Leighton got beat in Game 6.
Think about the coverage, though.
Oh, like, so many holes.
Your body is, but your body's outside the net.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so your body is on the post. The only thing covering the middle of the net, so that's fine for the shooter.
Down leg.
Is your down leg.
Yeah.
Whereas a reverse, think our whole torso is actually in the space. Our inside leg is in the space. And
more center mass.
What's the biggest increase in offense in the National Hockey League over the last 5 years, courtesy of Stephen Valiquette and Clearside Analytics?
Oh, slot line passes, cross ice passes.
Low slot line, below the hash marks.
Yep.
And it's not directly to the tap-ins. It's off skates, it's off legs, it's broken plays. Everything that those plays generate, nothing has increased more. I think they're up 41% is his number over the last 5 years since 2018. That is the biggest increase in offense in the National Hockey League. The reverse connects those things. They allow you to have short side coverage and net coverage on the pucks that sift through the middle. And if you're good at it, you can move well. You can execute both by dynamic save short side, but also dynamic movements that allow you to get out of it explosively and powerfully.
Pop proper leg recovery and all those things.
I'm going to go to pro reads again. InGoal's pro reads. I haven't gotten to this. We spent 45 minutes with Demko while he was injured. Some of the best pro reads we've had. We're about, I think, 6 or 7 into them. And we're just getting into, I need to highlight this for your audience. Maybe I even post it today. He's got a bunch of saves, and this is for the just stand up crowd. They're backdoor passes, tap-ins, and he gets there. Why? Because he was in a reverse to start with, and that gave him access to a quick shift. Like you said, body was in the net, and it was a quick movement, and he was there. If he's standing up square to that puck on the far wall,
no chance.
There's no way he gets that pad down, gets that rotation, and makes that push. So there are a lot of saves. Roberto Luongo used to say this. Yeah, everybody criticizes when I get beat short side high in reverse, and the internet says hashtag RVH fail. Nobody notices the 15 saves I made because of the reverse that I wasn't making before I added it to my game, and that's why it's there, folks.
Yep. And they look almost routine. It's like a guy slamming it into your pad on the post.
And they didn't used to be routine before we developed this position and
your
this
feet.
execution.
You're dead in your feet. Yeah.
I got tired the other day and was too tired to execute reverse, and I just stood up, and a play went right there, and it was a guy who played at a really high level, and I'm like, oh crap, I'm already up. Should I butterfly on him? I should have been in a reverse. And he slammed it right through where my short side pad would have been, off the backside pad between my legs and in. It's like, I think people forget how often those goals used to go in on the just stand up goalies.
How much more time do you have? I have 2 more questions for you.
Yeah. Well, we're good, buddy. We're good.
Okay. Zach Anderson tweeted in. He said, I'll start with the most obvious question for Woody. Would he be willing to move on from Hart? And is he a replaceable asset or one that you part with at your own risk from a play style and ability standpoint? Now, he's 24 years old. He's got 1 more year on his contract. He's an RFA. We have to consider these elements. And we also have to consider the element, Woody, of the fact that, in today's NHL, are there a lot of the franchise goaltenders? You look at Shesterkin. He's a franchise goaltender.
It's a short list.
It seems like it's shorter than it's ever been. And a lot of that is what you talked about happened in 17-18, really with the Penguins who started it with those slot line passes and everything. It's kind of, goaltending is trying to catch up still in elements of that. And they've done a good job in some areas, but I mean, Hellebuck is a franchise goaltender. So is Hart a replaceable asset?
I hesitate to say he's at the end of the day, outside of a handful of names, you can probably find, you know what, I'm going to answer it this way. This is me sitting on the fence so much my ass hurts. Talk about the panda. and I've had this conversation with goalie coaches, some of the best goalie coaches in the game, some of the best goalie coaches in the history of the game. We'll give you an elite number one goaltender. You can pick from three things: 3 great centers down the middle, an exceptional top 4, or an elite number one goaltender. What are you taking? All of them are going to say, give me that elite top 4 on defense, and I'll build you a goaltender that can win.
Yep.
And I think that the gap between the top and the bottom of the league, and even the next bunch of guys that are sitting in the minor leagues, look at what Alex Lyon did for the Florida Panthers, has shrunk so much. That gap is so much smaller. And yes, there are some and even at that elite level, it's not just their ability to play at that level, it's the consistency. And we saw that dip for Shesterkin this year. The expectations that came with having frankly, a historically good season last year. And what happens with expectations? When you don't meet them, you try harder. What happens when you try harder? You dig into your edges, you get a little lower and wider in your stance. It's like golf and goaltending. You can't try harder. And until he narrowed his stance back up down the stretch, he wasn't the same Igor. So maintaining it, which is why Vasilevsky is still my number one goalie in the world, quote unquote, because he's done it for so long at such a high level. That's really hard. The part that would scare me if I'm the Flyers about moving on from Carter Hart is she's showing signs of that. Now, there's been a process of, trusting his game, and his game has continued to develop. And like I said, top 10 for 2/3 of a season last year. It looked like there were strides there. There were so many more frequent signs of that Carter Hart that we saw at the beginning of his career. I still think he has the upside to be one of those guys for several seasons, one of those, number one goalies. So that's the risk. At the end of the day, though, if it's wasted behind a team, I don't think there's any goalies that can save a bad team. To a certain degree, Demko had a damn near historically good season himself 2 years ago for the Vancouver Canucks, a team that profiled defensively where the Flyers were last year. Still wasn't enough to get them in the playoffs, right? UC Saros is stopping bullets in his teeth, should be a Vezina finalist again this year. But if you don't have the team in front of him, so I think that until you have, if you can build that team, you can find a goalie. I hate to say replaceable because it makes them seem disposable.
Yeah.
But I'd be scared about, not everyone has that same level of upside. Now, I guess what I'm saying is I'm not sure you need that same level. And it's hard to find the guys that are at the Shesterkin level. But, it's easier to find sort of that middle pack guy that if you put him behind a great defensive team, he's going to give you the results you need to win. Yeah, I'd just be scared of losing the risk of, because I still see that in him. I still see that elite, that top 10 performance capability in him.
Return for goalies, because everybody says, "Oh, I'll trade Hart if we can get a quote unquote haul." Trading goalies,
not coming. It's not coming.
You don't get it. You don't get the return, do you?
No, that's the thing. It's a depreciated asset because of that depth and because of the unpredictability of it, right? Nobody wants to give term. Nobody wants it. I would avoid term with goaltenders. I would go short term as often as I could, unless I had an Igor Shesterkin or an Andrei Vasilevsky. The game changes, right? The game changes. Matt Murray didn't forget how to stop pucks. The way he stopped pucks when he won back-to-back cups doesn't work in the NHL anymore, in part because everybody started copying how the Penguins created offense. Now, Matt's adjusted his game a little bit, and I still think there's a goalie there because that process takes time to play out. And when he's healthy, he's produced some good results. But the game changes too much to sort of, to say that this style of goaltending. Now, somebody asked me in another podcast, who's going to be the best goalie in the NHL in 2030? I'm like, man, the best goal in the NHL in 2030 might not even look like what we consider great goaltending now because the game changes so much, right? UC Saros is a guy who probably doesn't even get drafted at his size, but I think he's one of the best. He's a guy I have on that list with Igor Shesterkin and Andrei Vasilevsky.
Yeah, there's 6 of them.
Yeah. I think Carter still has that in him, but again, I'm biased. I've seen the kid at POE camps. I watched him in juniors and there's something. I've always thought there was something special there, and I still think, as a goalie, there are things he does that are at such a level and ahead of the curve at such a level that I still see that potential there, and I'd be worried about it, walking from it. But that said,
especially here,
there's a big list of guys that if you can put a good team in front of them, they're going to give you just that, it's all you need is just a little bit above expected. And if they get on a heater in the playoffs, there you go.
Yeah. Last thing for you. Cal Peterson was acquired in the deal. 28 years of age, had a good start to his career, his first 54 games in a 9-17. But the wheels have fallen off the wagon, played only 10 games in the NHL this past year. Is he salvageable at this point? I know you were high on him before, and I know the Kings were, and he was the next one for them to take over the crease, but it hasn't worked out.
Yeah,
Change of scenery certainly needed there.
Yeah, early on, his adjusted numbers were really good. He had that breakout season that got him that contract, and he made me look really good because in a small sample the year before, like he was the guy that when I was asked, I do a thing annually on Sirius, and he sort of asked me, "Who's your breakout candidate this year?" And I pegged him, and he did. He just didn't play a ton because Quick was there, and I thought that was the start of great things for Cal Peterson because the underlying numbers indicated that was coming. And when you looked at the eye test, in a game that has become increasingly east-west, like the way he holds edges and has patience on his skates, like all things that I would look at as attributes that are likely to succeed in this new NHL, he had them all. And, there are times, and this comes from other people that have watched him closer than I, other goalie people, like other goalie coaches around the National Hockey League, they felt at times like, and this happens, I can't remember, Justin Goldman from the Goalie Guild. I want to give him credit for the term. I think he calls it mirroring. You play along. You watch a guy every night when you're the backup. You watch him every day in practice. He's got 2 Stanley Cups. It's like osmosis. There are elements of your playing partner's game that can creep into yours. And I had a lot of other goalie people that I think are smart goalie people tell me, they felt like he started playing a little bit too much like Jonathan Quick at times. And sort of sliding and moving all over the place rather than having that patience of waiting for the game to come to him. Again, I haven't watched him closely enough to make that statement myself, but these are people I trust that sort of felt they saw that creeping into his game. I believe in the skill set, that patience on the skates. His skating is exceptional. His edge control is exceptional. When he's on, his patience is exceptional. He's not a big goalie. He's not a blocking goalie. He's got a good reactive base. His technical foundation, I thought, was, there's a little extra movement. You could tidy that up a little bit. I still think there's a goalie there. I don't think you lose it all. I just think it might need, and like you said, a new voice and some new direction. Just maybe tighten some things, put the focus on some of the strengths, and maybe, again, get rid of a little bit of that extra movement that we saw out of both him and Jonathan Quick, I think, early this season with the Kings.
Be who you are as a goalie. Don't try to be the other guy.
Well, and I don't even know that it's intentional, but man, like you watch a guy every night, and some of those elements creep in for sure.
Yeah, thank God I never played on a team with Henrik Lundqvist. I'd be like, I can just sit back on the goal line. We get shredded.
Think of all the goaltending I've watched and doesn't help me, so I don't think it matters. If I could probably I wish osmosis worked for me.
By the way, he is excellent as an analyst. To have another high-level goaltender that's able to articulate really well and break it down on a national broadcast on TNT is fantastic.
Yeah, and he's got the goalies' backs too. There's been a couple times and there's some kinds where the other ones they just kind of, I can't remember the exact situation where it kind of got dismissed. I'm like, no, hold on. He just explained the whole thing to you. Don't tell me that that's a save that, he's got to have that. No, he just explained exactly why that went in. And I think he's excellent. I'm not surprised by it. He's just, and folks, I know this is a Flyers podcast, but if you appreciated how good he was, even if it was against your team for all those years, I highly recommend going back. And again, shameless plug. We had Henrik on after his retirement for an entire hour on the InGoal radio podcast. He was awesome. And he was exceptional. And you're seeing that on the TNT stage. He's again, at the root levels, I think the best are always goalie geeks. They don't always maintain it to the certain degree. And some guys aren't. Connor Hellebuck he doesn't want to talk about goaltending all the time. He needs his escape from it. But a lot of these guys, I think Carter's a goalie geek. And there were times where no stone unturned, always looking for new things. Maybe that there was too much of that, too many voices, too many ideas. As you mature, you sort of narrow what your foundation is rather than always looking for new ideas. But the guys that see it at that level, that understand it, that can break it down at that level, that look for new things and understand what works for them and what doesn't, like, to me, they're the ones that end up with the long careers. And when you listen to Lundqvist break the game down now, and you listen to the way he broke down his own game and his own career on our podcast, it's no surprise that he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. At least he is in my eyes.
Yeah. And Carter's a total first preseason game. He's like, oh, dude, I saw him in the hallway after the game, and he's like, look at the glove. The new Brian's glove. It's got a snap in there for the wrist to anchor the wrist and show me all this new stuff. Like, he's totally, because he knows I'm totally into it too. But as far as Lundqvist goes, I'm so annoyed by the guy. He's just so handsome, perfect. He's has like really ugly and smelly feet or something. Something's got to be wrong with him.
I know. I think he's just the perfect human.
Damn him. And he's a twin. Woody, this was exceptional. I thank you so much. Best of luck out there for the remainder of the Cup final and then the offseason and everything. Good luck with your skate today, man.
Yeah, I know. I mean, they got to play against guys who are half my age and twice my skill level. So chances are there's going to be a lot of goals going in today, but I'm going to have fun doing it. Hopefully it came across in this conversation how much I love this position and playing it and talking about it. And I always enjoy talking with you, Jason, because I know you share the passion. And anytime we get to geek out, I didn't even keep track of time here, but it felt like a couple of minutes. I'm looking now, and it was a long time. I love it. Anytime, buddy. Happy to do it.
All right. Check out Kevin's stuff, InGoalMagazine.com, InGoal Mag on Twitter, at InGoal Mag, at Kevin is InGoal. Great stuff there. Check out the pro reads and much more. That is episode 69 of Stick to Hockey Live. Everybody, thanks for listening and watching. Have a great weekend.
#nice.